Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Param Ishvaro Guratmeti Mochibeda Vibhagine Vyomapta Vyakta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Savavedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti 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 Om Om Namaste. Welcome to our Tripura. We are the page, which page is this one? 236. We begin today from the a note, verse 69, she, Tripura, who is transcendence, which is who is awareness in perfection, intelligence, and total summation of all eyes, all egos of her own will, divides herself into the experiencer and the world experienced. And then imperfection is concomitant with such division. There is bound to be an insentient phase which represents the aforesaid exterior or unmanifest void. The sentient phase is Sadashiva Tattva. So this Sadashiva Tattva is referred to in the Upanishad as Ishvara. So it's the interface between Satya and Mithya, as sometimes I put. Now Sadashiva, also not being perfect, sees the unmanifest void. So Ishvara, also not being perfect, sees the unmanifest void, meaning to say it knows its nature, meaning to say the sentient phase becomes aware of the insentient phase, but yet knows it to be of himself, feeling I am this also. So it's it refers to Ishvara, and as integral part of Mithya, and not being fully absolute perfect consciousness, and with the ability of knowing the unmanifest nature of itself, and as well of Jiva and Jagata. It knows everything to be Brahman. It's also aware and become aware of the insentient universe, but yet knows it to be Brahman. So it refers to those pointers that say that Ishvara is self-conscious and conscious of the Mithya universe, but it's conscious of itself as Satya, as Brahman. So becomes aware of this phenomenal world, but yet knows that this world is also me and myself alone. The sentient phase is called Ishvara, and the insentient phase is called Jagata, or here is Maya or Avidya. In the Upanishads, they say. Later, Sadashiva identifies the insentient phase. So Ishvara identifies the insentient phase with his or her body at the time of starting creation. Then it goes by the name of Ishvara. So again, try to explain a little bit the nature of Ishvara, which fundamentally is described as the Sadashiva, which is also said the nature, the tattva, the most fundamental prakriti, or Sadashiva tattva. Later, Sadashiva identifies the insentient phase and says, "This is my body, and this is my creation." Then it goes by the name of Ishvara. Now, this contaminate higher ego named Ishvara divides itself into three aspects. So the three aspects we have seen: darkness, brightness, and activity, which is associated to the three energies, the building blocks of the universe. And these building blocks, these three qualities or energies, are going to manifest different universe. Brahmas, Brahmas, the creators, so to speak, are innumerable, all of whom are engaged in creating worlds. Vishnus are many as well, and they are busy on different universe, how sustaining and protecting and holding the world through its intelligence and laws and principles. And here Shiva is referred as Rudras, is the one who destroys or recycles everything in due time. So this is the way the Vedas present the creation, but all of them are only made in the grand mirror of Tripura, abstract consciousness, Brahman, I, myself, howsoever we want to understand the true nature of this apparent reality, which are but images project upon consciousness. These are only manifest but are not concrete, since they have never been created. This is an important point. So something that was never created but is just apparently superimposed, such as the ring of gold. Ring of gold is just a superimposition in gold. Gold goes for satya, goes to reality, that which is the fundamental nature of any and all namarupas. So these namarupas, they are not really created, truly created, because they always exist potentially in gold. So likewise, this universe, which is sustaining, projects, sustaining, and destroyed by these three entities, namely Brahman, Vishnu, and Shiva or Rudra, the Rudras, the destroyers. But these three entities, they sustain something that does not really exist. It's all mithya, nature, mithya tattvam. It's something that does not really, it's not really real, let's say. The Supreme Being is always the sum total of all the egos, just as you feel the body and identify yourself with different senses and organs without deviating from the ego, so does the transcendental pure Brahman intelligence, Tripura, similarly identify itself with all. So this is a nice analogy. It says that the Jivatma can identify itself with different functions or organs. Identify with the five sense organs, identify with the mind and the feelings, and there are different sense of I am attribute to the Jivatma. And the Jivatma is one and the same, but seen from different angles, it appears to be the five koshas or the three bodies and the different aspects of the human Jivatma's experience. So likewise, the transcendental pure intelligence identifies itself with all, but not limiting itself to any of these appearances within itself. Beginning with Ishvara, it first identifies with Ishvara, and then with the minutes of protoplasma. So it was going to identify with the macro phenomenon, such as the totality referred to as Sadasiva or Ishvara, but yet remains unaffected, and yet remains one regardless of howsoever it identifies. These are analogies. So Ishvara does not identify with different aspects of the Jiva's apparent reality the same way Jivas identify with different aspects of its body-mind complex. No? It's just to allow us to trace some parallels. No? So Ishvara remains the same single phenomenon. Likewise, the Jivatma remains the same, although sometimes he identifies with the prana, sometimes he identifies with the food body, sometimes with the emotions, sometimes. So, but it's the Jivatma is one and the same. So again, just as you cannot taste anything with the aid of a tongue, nor apprehend other things without the aid of all other sense organs, so also the supreme being Sadasiva acts and knows through the agency of Brahma and Shiva, Vishnu and Shiva, and even no, through the agency of Brahma knows and experiences itself, and also the worms in the micro world. Just as your conscious self remains pure and unqualified, although it forms the basis of all the activities of limbs, organs, and sense, so also Supreme Intelligence is unaffected through holding all the egos within herself. So all the eyes, the reflected consciousness are held in this Supreme Intelligence. And the same way, in parallel, we have all forms of activities, which depends on many limbs or sense organs and pranas, and there are so many factors contributing for any kind of activity. And likewise, we have supreme intelligence holding all the reflect jivas within herself. At the same time, seeing itself as one single phenomenon that manifests as all reflect consciousness and all reflect inert matter. She is not aware of any distinctions. So it says that this consciousness is not aware of distinctions in the vastness of the cosmos, nor does she make difference among the egos. Are you there with me? Hey, Mark, good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, good to see you too, Arlinda and Lynn.
In this manner, the cosmos shines in her like image shines in a mirror. The shining of the cosmos is due to her power, consciousness through the prakriti of Maya reflecting the universe, the shiny world of Ramji. The shining of the cosmos is due to her reflection in the same way the individuals in the world, namely you, I, and many others, all flashes of the same consciousness. Since so we are small reflections of the same consciousness. The entire cosmos is like images reflecting in consciousness. In the same way, the individuals in the world are reflections happening in the same consciousness. Since all are only phase of the supreme consciousness, that alone will shine in purity, which is bereft of taints or impediments in the shape of objects. So it's free and independent of whatsoever reflects upon itself. So it's the only reality as we know, it's self-shining. And somehow any superimposition of attributes of Namarupas is going to shine, appearing as apart from consciousness, but it's not. Just as the shining mirror is clear when images no longer appear in it, and the same mirror remains untainted even when the images reflect in it, likewise, pure intelligence consciousness subsists pure and untainted, whether the world is seen or not seen. So these concepts are very, very extensively known and explored by us in our group. So this, anybody has anything to say, any doubt about this passage that I just covered, I just read? I need you to say a word because I'm not seeing you.
No, it's good. As you say, it's beautifully illustrated, but what we've seen before.
Yeah. This untainted supreme consciousness is one without a second and filled with bliss. This passage about the Ananda nature of the supreme consciousness is beautiful here. It's nice. This untainted supreme intelligence is one without a second, and it's filled with bliss because it is totally free from the least trace of unhappiness. The sum total of all happiness, of all living beings, all jivas, has taken shape as the Supreme One because she is obviously desired by all, and she is no other than the Self, which consists of pure bliss, because the Self is the most beloved by everyone. This is a very nice, profound concept, important to be understood, which goes to say that consciousness, the supreme Brahman, is the only source of satisfaction, bliss, peace, and happiness. So we again need to remind ourselves that Brahman or Tripura is not an entity. So it's not an experiencing, knowing entity, but it is the source of completion, of peace, of bliss, and happiness. So we need to remember the relationship between happiness and fullness. So this consciousness being one without a second is whole, full, and complete. And a principle which is absolutely complete in itself, and alone, the only thing, the only reality, does not have anything missing or lacking. And then the concept of bliss, which is often translated as happiness, because the human jivas wants to live, to find happiness. Unfortunately, human jivas fall for the misconclusion that happiness is to be found in people, place, things, and circumstance. But they, due to this ignorance, they ignore the fact that the happiness is the very nature of the self, which is the very nature of the I. So why? Because this supreme intelligence is the only reality. Therefore, it's non-dual. It's the only thing, and it's whole, full, and complete. Okay. Therefore, it says here the Supreme Brahman is free from any trace of unhappiness. But we should not conclude with that kind of experiential language, that Brahman is an entity that experiences happiness 24/7 as opposed to unhappiness. This happiness and unhappiness it relates only to the Jiva Atma in relation to the objects in media that mistakenly appear to be producing happiness and unhappiness, but it's not the case. So we establish this basic understanding, Viveka here. So the bliss and peace and happiness is of the nature of non-dual consciousness. And then it says that the sum total of all happiness of all living beings does take shape as the supreme one, because she is obviously desired by all. So it's saying that the happiness, the total of happiness that all human people, human jivas experience, is only due to the inner happiness of the self, which lives within every living creature. So every human being has this non-dual nature, this this one nature, oneness nature of completion and fullness, which is lacking nothing and needs nothing, and everybody is looking for happiness, and everybody develops a strong absolute love for this happiness. So this love for happiness manifests, unfortunately, as love for the object. But in truth, every living creature loves the self, you understand? But unconsciously, they love the self as the superimposition of the attributes of Maya, so, as the objects. So people are going to love the object, not knowing that they love the self, because they love happiness. There is no one being that is not in search of happiness. So every love for object is the love for the self. So here it's put in different terms as the sum total of all happiness is the happiness of Tripura, of the self, of consciousness, because the desire of every living creature is the desire for the happiness of the self, the fullness and completion of the self. So this self is desired by all beings, but nobody knows that the love they have is not for the object, but it's for the nature of the self, the nature of God, and much less, very few people understand that they are searching, seeking, and loving things, not knowing that the love they have is not for the world, is not for God, but is the love for one's very nature. So this is the bottom line here. She's desired by all knowledge is all desires desire for the self, and she is no longer than the self within each one of these living creatures. So each is the bliss which is inherent to the conscious existence of limitless nature, which is the essential nature of every creature. So therefore, this self is the most loved by every creature. Every creature has a strong knowledge to this happiness, which is the nature of the self. And it is somehow put on objects, but you know what? Comes a time that person is going to give away all possessions, all objects, just to experience one more day of life, okay? Because ultimately, the love that people has is for life itself, for existence itself. Of course, this existence is taken as the body mind being associated with the pranas and I like it, enlivened, So the self is the most beloved. Everybody loves to be alive. So everybody gives everything to stay alive forever. Everybody would love to live forever. Everybody seeking searching immortality, because everybody loves existence, loves its own consciousness, but not understanding that is the very nature of the Jiva Atma. One begin loving God and loving the world. Okay, so but everybody loves is going to the self, but unconsciously, subconsciously. But at the moment of death, everybody is ready to give away every acquisition in the world just for immortality, just for the self. Please let me live forever here, or let me live one more day. For the sake of the self, people discipline their bodies and subdue their desires. All sensual pleasures are mere sparks of bliss inherent as the self, in the self, as the nature of the self. Now it goes further in this verse, saying that all austerities and disciplines and efforts that the spiritual religious people do, is for the sake of the love they have of the self. Okay, they do everything, and they are going to sacrifice all their desires, all sense pleasure desires, because they love the self. They got an understanding that there is a higher source of happiness, which is not the sense pleasures gained in the world. And then they move to God. They want to find this happiness in their relationship with the Creator, with God, with Ishvara, until one develops the maturity to understand that I have been seeking happiness in the world, which is the self, and then I transferred the search for happiness from the world to God, and God as well is the self. And now that I understand that the nature of God, and I explore that, I investigate that, and then the Upanishad helps me to understand that it's of my same nature. The Ishvara's nature and Jivatma's nature is the same as consciousness. No, so now I know that every effort I have been doing, every discipline, every sacrifice I have been doing for the sake of the love I have for my own self, my own self. Spiritual people are known to lead abstemious lives, to deny ordinary comforts to the bodies, and even to torture them in order that they may secure a happy existence after death. And then there are those that say, I'm okay with sacrificing everything here, but I want happiness. I want happiness after death. Without understanding the sacrifice that needs to be done is not really absolutely these austerities, denying any contact with the world, suppressing the sense organs and so on, but is the sacrificing one's intelligence, or not intelligence, one's ignorance, because it is one's ignorance that make us sick and search happiness in the world first, and then in the Creator second. And then they say, it's okay, I'm now seeking happiness in afterlife. Okay, I know here is not possible. There is no such thing as happiness or liberation here. But when I leave this body, so I'm going to abstain for all kinds of pleasures and comforts of life, because I'm invested in the after death. So their actions clearly prove their love for the self. So they love the self, they are sacrificing a lot of comfort for the sake of that love of the self. They are still being misled to believe that they are something other than the self. Their hope for future happiness and bliss in afterlife further establish the unique beatific nature of the self. So although they are misled in their conduct, in their search, and they are hoping for gaining this ultimate bliss of happiness after life, but still points to the fact that every happiness lives within the self. Okay, because that's the nature of the self. But the Jivatma never understand that the nature of God is my nature. The nature of God is the nature of Brahman, which is by nature. This is the ultimate final understanding that put an end to this problem. Otherwise, one may keep going to higher locus to experience different kinds of bliss, but they always have to end up coming back here. Their hope for the future point to that fact, surpassing or suppressing sensual pleasures which might be indulged in here and now. For sensual pleasure are similar to a sense of relief left unburdened. So generally speaking, living in this meteor world, one must engage the world and experience of the opposite pairs are unavoidable. Pleasures and pains are always to be there. And as we transact in meteor, sensual pleasures are similar to a sense of relief felt on unburdening oneself of a crushing load. Sensual pleasures are similar to a sense of relief that we experience in the deep sleep state. Pure intelligence is indeed bliss because it's the only one we search for. So the sense pleasures, they are nicely explained with the examples of the happiness we experience when we are unburdened by something causing pain, such as a huge load or a small stone or two on your shoes, or anything that, or a very severe tooth pain, ache. So, and then we say, "Ooh, oh my God, now I'm experiencing happiness." So the happiness is nothing but that, is unburdening something that is creating great suffering and pain. So we know where it's all going. I believe you guys know where it's taking us. Let me see here one thing. Okay. Are you guys with me? Okay, now I see you. I see you. So we know what that conversation is taking us. So there is something that is causing suffering, and it's not something that we are carrying on our shoulder, or it's not a stone in our shoes, or physical pain. It is something else. It is the mind stuffed with desires and aversions, likes and dislikes. So that causes great suffering and pain. So there is nothing in gain happiness by acquisition or avoidance of objects of the world, okay? Because that is not a positive happiness. The same way you're not positively happy when you abandon a burden of something you are carrying, and then you say, "Oh my God, now I can drop those two luggage, and now I feel really happy." So there's nothing positive in that happiness. And the same way, there is nothing really positive in the happiness we find in the world by acquisition of objects of desires or avoidance of objects of pain, of fear. So what's the point here? The point is that those are not really happiness, but it's similar to the deep sleep state. For a moment, somehow your mind was resolved, and you don't experience the pain of the desires and aversions, and then you have a fleeting moment of happiness. Often it comes with the gain of something we desire for long, and then that's going to give us a break. The same way deep sleep is a break from our suffering. because in the other two states we are subject to ragas and diversions all the time. So that's the point. There is nothing positive in the happiness we find in the world. It's so defected, absolutely defected, the misleading. So where is it coming from? It's coming from the self. When the self is free from the load of ragas and dveshas. Therefore, we should not search for the world of objects. We should not search for God, although the search for Ishvara is a very important intermediary stage in this process, but we should not stop there. We should not be stuck there. We're going to see that with Manduki as well. We should go all the way to understand the true nature of reality. It lies within the self, and I am the self. I am the only source. I'm only thing worth to be sought for. I need to seek to myself because now I understood that all other pleasures are just fleeting moments of dropping a burden. And the burden is desires and fear. Oh, and then I'm going to turn off my desires and fears, and I'm not going to be subject but by desires and aversions. So try. This is a beast. It's so powerful, this ignorance. Predispositions are there, tendencies are there. So it's all profoundly established there in the causal body, and to uproot and to burn those seeds of ignorance, it's a long process, as we all know. But it's important to understand that I am the only source of true happiness and bliss. And all other happiness I find in the world are just deceives. They are just illusions. Bliss is self. There we go. Bliss is my nature. Bliss is objects of the world, although they are tangible. They arise in the mind of the thinker. And the thinker is not apart from consciousness. So the objects, as we know, they manifest as physical objects, or the physical object comes from the subtle, and the subtle comes from the physical object, tangible object. In both of these levels, the subtle and the physical material, they are resolved in consciousness, in Brahman, in supreme intelligence. If the thinker be purged of even the least trace of thought, individuality is lost, and the abstract intelligence is there to be realized. So we have the thinker. I am the thinker of my thoughts and the doer of my actions, and that holds our sense of identity. If we understand these teachings, and then for even the least trace of absence of thought is going to destroy my sense of individuality. I need the thought coming back to say, okay, I am, and I am the body mind. So this individuality is lost in a moment in which the thinker is not producing thoughts in regards to the world, which reinforce the nature of this world as real. This misconclusion or misperception that the world is real. And then they understand that only consciousness is real, because I thought that I, the ego, and the world we are interconnected. We exist simultaneously. And then if my thoughts and all my vasanas, my likes and dislikes are dropped for a moment, the ego disappears for a moment. And if the ego disappears for a moment, there is satisfaction and peace and bliss. So, and then one must infer that happiness is not in any gain of objects, but it's in absence of compulsive binding, likes and dislikes, desires and aversions. And then consciousness shines on its own, is the only reality. So this is simple understanding that most of us have heard several times, but needs to be applied and remembered all the time. You understand? So that we don't fall for this trick. I mean, everybody who passed by the teachings of Shining World knows that the joy, the happiness is not in any object, But another thing is to live from that platform of understanding, and not be fooled, be deceived again and again by the mind in projecting desired objects to go and be chased, No, I myself, I consciousness is the only source of happiness. I am whole, full, and complete. These objects, they are just tricks produced by my Ishvara. And I'm also responsible because I'm feeding into the macrocosmic ignorance by putting there, yes, and I believe in this, and I want this as well. So just Papa Noel, so I have a list of desires and fears, and I keep sending it to my Ishvara. So the Jiva is responsible for this mess. We need to apply these teachings, my friends. Nothing else is admissible in the circumstance in which my sense of individuality, which is nothing but my likes and dislikes, were given up and my true nature was claimed. Since it is ultimate reality, synonymous with emancipation and immortality, there must be beatitude in it in order that it may be sought for everyone unconsciously. It in fact is compact with bliss, dense bliss alone, mass of peace and mass of satisfaction, undisturbed completion. That's why everybody loves the self. Oh, but people love the self. No, they love the world. No, in the very, very end, they're ready to give every acquisition they got to the world just to live forever, just to live one more day, because they love to be. Every human being loves to be. There is no love greater than the love to exist, the love to be. So Nisargadatta Maharaj used to put it out very strong. Every love is the love to be. Therefore, have no problem in loving yourself, but understand what you love. You're not loving the body. Love yourself, because you already love yourself without knowing that you love yourself. How? Because the contrary. In fact, this beatitude, this source of peace, love, and satisfaction, is a great mass, a dense mass of bliss alone, of completion, of non-dual fullness. How? Because the contrary, meaning to say unhappiness or incompletion, is associated with the exterior. It appears and disappears. So the unhappiness appears and disappears, because it's associated with the exterior object, world of objects of desires, and then appears and disappears. Such cannot be the case if unhappiness formed part of the self. So it's saying that unhappiness is not intrinsic part of the self. And why so? Because unhappiness appears and disappears. So how about happiness? So happiness appears to appear and disappear, but it does not appear and disappear, because happiness is synonymous of fullness, and that is the true nature of the self. Unhappiness cannot be part of the self because it appears and disappears. pleasure must similarly be said to be associated with the body, the sense possession. However, a little thought, a little examination will convince one that these so-called enjoyments are meant only for the self, for the sake of the self. So the self is what it matters and nothing else. But every little being always seeks pleasure. Thus, pleasure is the very nature of the self. So nobody seeks unpleasure or pain. That is the paradox of all of that. No human being and no other creatures, no jiva seeks unhappiness. But the misunderstanding or the non-understanding that the objects are not the very source of consciousness, but the very self of the seeker, makes them seek happiness in the world of objects. But the self, the very self of the seeker is the true source of happiness. Pleasure is the self. So he's coming around to say that pleasure is the self, or the self is the only source of pleasure. So if we are looking for pleasure in such fact, we must remember that I don't need to go far away. I don't need to step out of my house, or I don't need to start a computer or buy anything on Amazon, because the self is pleasure, the self is happiness. But sensual pleasure is quite obvious, whereas the bliss of the self is imaginary. It's purely imaginary because it's not similarly experienced. Sensual pleasure is something obvious, and we know that it does not really deliver the happiness, whereas the bliss of the self is purely imaginary because it's not similarly experienced. Every little being always seeks pleasure, so thus pleasure is the self. But sensual pleasure, he's making a distinction here, the author, between real happiness and sensual pleasure happiness. Sensual pleasure is quite obvious to all people, whereas the bliss of the self is purely imaginary in their minds because it's not experientially available like in the case of the samsaric pleasure. The scriptures must be seated against this contention. Okay, it's the contention that is going to be addressed here. But sensual pleasure is quite obvious, whereas the bliss of the self seems to be an idea, notion, imagination, because it's how I'm going to experience the same pleasure I have when I eat my favorite food just by turning to my conscious existence. No, I'm not going to experience. This is just a trip. This is imagination. This is a philosophy. You understand? There is no real experiential ananda or bliss in searching the self or claiming I am the self. Because the experience is not there in the same terms. So now let's see the contention here. The scripture must be cited to go against this contention. The scriptures say that all the sensual pleasures do not together amount to a particle of the inherent bliss of the self. So this is the radical objection to that. If people say, "Oh, but pleasure," so I have great pleasure when I drink a beer, when I eat my favorite food, or when I do this and I do that. So you say, well, none of these sensual or sexual pleasures put together come close to a small particle of the satisfaction which is inherent to the nature of the self. Once you drop the load. What is the load? The load is the belief that this bliss is contained in the objects out there, and then you have the load of running in the rat race. So you drop the load, and then you will see that all this little bliss you get from sensual pleasure objects, do not compare to a small particle. And just as unlimited space, or just as consciousness is unknown in its purity, unmanifested, pure consciousness, but becomes manifest in its association with objects around. So, like another example, a pot for fetching water. Water is our goal. We want to get the water, but water is impossible with the pot. We need a pot. So also the experiential bliss in its purity is not enjoyable in the same way it is experienced through the body-mind complex. The same way you cannot drink water without a cup. But the same becomes enjoyable when broken up in sensual pleasure. This is the truth of the scripture statement. So the scripture is saying that, okay, this ananta is not experiential, okay? This ananta is one's very nature. Once we drop the seek and search for sensual pleasures by gaining, seeking and searching for objects that can give me some fleeting moments of pleasure. Once we give up all of that, you are going to sacrifice those fleeting moments of pleasure. I said, no, I'm not willing to sacrifice that. I said, well, but even if there is no experiential bliss, of the self, because the self is not an experience, claim your nature, understand your nature is not going to produce a blissful experience, but because of that, you don't want to give up the seek and search for sensual pleasures, through the sense. There is already a good reason for you to drop that search, that seek, for the, because every pleasure comes with a pain and comes with a lot of facts. You cannot experience pleasure and happiness without suffering and pain. So that alone would be enough to make somebody with a certain degree of viveka and intelligence to say, no, it's not worth it. It's not worth it, because there is misery side by side with every moment of joy relate to the meteor world. So this is one point. So what is the other point? So and then one develops vairagya, one develops maturity, equanimity, and one is not attracted by the objects that give sensual pleasures. And and seen from other people, you say this person is flat, this person is boring, this person is not happy at all, But it's strange, this person is not suffering as well, So yeah, I prefer the, pleasure and pain, the happiness and sufferings of life, the ups and downs of life. But there is another point that I want to make here, that lack of discrimination will keep people in samsara, just looking, searching, chasing the ups and downs of emotional experience, without knowing that there is an elemental experience in self-knowledge, in claiming one's nature as ananda, which is shanti, peace, yes, inner satisfaction, is the highest pleasure there is. We have to remember that self-knowledge is there for the Jiva Atma. Brahman is beyond knowledge and ignorance. We want self-knowledge because we heard that we can take care of this human problem, which is pleasure and pain, and a lot of pain. So, so there is an elemental experiential element in self-knowledge, which is the highest aspect of pleasure, but it's not dense sensual pleasure through the five senses or through a dense mind. Okay, it is a very subtle, very refined pleasure called shanti, called peace, equanimity, vairagya. Okay, love, compassion. So this is what is available in self knowledge. Okay, which is totally different from the ups and downs and joys and sufferings experienced in Nietzsche. No? One may contend that the self is not bliss, but it seeks bliss. If it were true, why should there be happiness in relieving oneself of a crushing load? One may contend that the self is not bliss, but the self is searching for happiness or bliss. No? If it were true, why should there be happiness just in relieving oneself of a certain crushing load? This is perceptible at the instant of relief, and similar happiness prevails in dreamless slumber. So when we want to sleep, we want to sleep to drop the load of another day of likes and dislikes. No? So the two analogies are there. You're dropping a load, and then you're dropping the awaker to become a sleeper. No? There are no positive sources of pleasure when you drop those elements that cause pain and pleasures. This pleasure is, however, real since it's within one's experience and cannot be avoided. So it probably refers to the deep sleep. The pleasure of deep sleep is experienced by everyone, cannot be avoided, is built into the system, and everyone has this experience, and everybody loves the deep sleep. Therefore, it must be of the nature of the self. So the self is not searching for happiness. The self is happiness. And another point proving to it is that everybody loves the night, the state of deep sleep, because in there we experience a sense of fullness and completion, which is in analogy based on the fact that I dropped my desires and aversions in deep sleep. So it must be by nature, because I'm not doing anything. I'm just stopping carrying a load, which is my ragas and dveshas, my likes and dislikes. So everybody experiences that every day. Hopefully some people have trouble. So this pressure must be inherent in my very, very being. This pleasure may be said to be relief from pain and not true pleasure. If so, why does a person awaken from sleep say, I slept happily? So the bottom line here, the conclusion is this pleasure is my very nature. It does not depend on me being relieved from pain. It's my very nature. What do I need to do to leave, to drop my burden? You just have to give up your ignorance. No, but this is doing something. It's not doing something positive. It's just dropping that which was causing pain, which is your ignorance that makes you try to control your experience. So that's the point here. It's not that you need to do anything. We don't need to do. We need to understand. That is what Vedanta is all about. Nothing needs to be done. Only understanding that desires is the enemy, is what's preventing you to be happy and peaceful. And everybody enjoys the night of sleep, and everybody says, oh, I slept good today and I was happy. The person has felt happiness in sleep. There are no happenings associated with that happiness. This is another clear point. The happiness we experience in sleep is not associated with any happening, any event. It's just the nature of consciousness. It must be of my very nature. Otherwise, even the worst savage or an animal killed would only release sleep, nor would not release sleep, nor indeed long for it. So everybody appreciates sleep. Everybody loves it. And almost seems that a lot of people would like to sleep forever. But most people do not consider suicidal because they believe that if they lose their body, they lose their existence. And furthermore, suicide is not a solution, because the only solution is canceling the ignorance, likes, desires, and aversions by this profound understanding of the nature of happiness. The nature of happiness is the nature of the third aspect of my very own self, which is ananta, or limitlessness. Okay, so we go back here to say goodbye, but before that I want to know if you have anything to say, to contribute, to comment.
It's been very topical today, Arlindo, because this week I've seen two friends who are both going out in the world yet again. They're both old and they both should know better, but they're going out in the world again, seeking satisfaction and pleasure. And one of them is a very spiritual man I've known for a long time. And I was surprised when he told me he joined a dating agency so that he could then re-establish a relationship to find that pleasure. Anyway, so yeah, I actually felt a little bit sad for him. I thought, oh, you should know better. But anyway, it's been very topical today. And the other thing is, this morning when I was meditating, I realized how we as individuals, we perpetuate our own samsara just through our desires and through the input that we take into our minds.
Definitely.
And this was a good realization to have.
Yeah.
So
we are co-creators, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Okie dokie. So next Monday I will be traveling. We meet again next Thursday, okay? Not Friday, Thursday, so that we don't stay too far from our next class. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste. One last question. I spoke a little bit with Lynn before. We're gonna end this text next Thursday. We go into Mandukya, or you want to try this other text that Lynn has mentioned? Lynn, why don't you send that text to our group? And then I take a look, Mark take a look, and then we see if we want to take a shorter project now with that Nididhyasana, or if we want to go into the heavy duty Mandukya. So let's make that decision together once I take a look into this, and Mark as well. Okay? Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you so much.
Much love.
Much love.
Thank you, Arlindo. Same to you. Okay, bye now.